Hi everybody, so my name's Annika and my global action plan basically focuses around decreasing diabetes rates in Aboriginal communities. Just to start, a little bit about me. So first things first, I'm going to be attending the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland next year, and I'm going to be taking a 6-year direct entry medical program. So I would be graduating with an MB, which is an international equivalent to an MD, and I will also be graduating with a Bachelor in the Art of Obstetrics. That has actually been one of the biggest challenges in my gap, and I will talk about that later. Picture number 2, I'm a STEM student. So STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, and I would say I at least categorize myself in 2 of those. I have always been interested in science. I've always loved science, and I knew that going into my Global Leadership Diploma course, I wanted to do something where I could fill my passion of science and also try and, help the world. Number 3, is the Ontario logo. Fun fact, I have actually never traveled within Canada outside of Ontario. I've only ever traveled within Ontario and then internationally. I have actually been to, in the last few years, I've actually traveled to a few native reserves as well, but only within Ontario. So I knew that if I was going to do something within Canada, that it would be something close to home. And number 4 is kinesiology. Now that might sound strange, but when I was in my kinesiology class in first term, we were watching a documentary, and the documentary was about how sugar is causing this epidemic of diabetes and how it actually is an epidemic. And one of the excerpts from the documentary was actually a 20-minute clip of this community in Ontario called Sandy Lake. They actually had the highest obesity and diabetes rates for their community, as a percentage. That was absolutely unheard of. And they took it upon themselves to create a program that decreased the obesity rates in the youth, and that eventually trickled down. It was put in place about 30 years ago, and it actually did trickle down into their children. So they've all been living healthier lifestyles, and they've decreased their overall obesity rates. Diabetes is a little bit harder to combat, but they have decreased the obesity rates in that community. So that got me thinking about what I wanted to do for my gap, and that really got me inspired to see a community taking action themselves. And I thought, I didn't know that this was even an issue. I didn't think that Aboriginal communities would be more susceptible to higher obesity and diabetes rates. So that got me to research the problem a little bit. So when I researched it, I found that there's about 1.4 million people in Canada who identify as Aboriginal. So although that's a small percentage of our population, that's still a large group of people. 1,400. Next number. That is the year, or the century that the 1400s is the century that Europeans first started colonizing Canada. This was when Aboriginals first started losing their rights, losing their culture, and losing really everything that existed about their religion as well. 1763, that was the year, I believe, of the Royal Proclamation, and that took away, basically it made Aboriginals and Indigenous people wards of state, so they couldn't do anything on their own. 1867, that was when the Indian Act was passed, and this was before Confederation, and it actually gave Indigenous people very little rights. They couldn't grow certain crops without governmental permission. They couldn't drink. They couldn't do a lot of things that they should have been able to do without governmental permission. 2008 was the first year that Stephen Harper recognized and apologized for the residential school genocide. That was a very, very large step in reconciliation with Aboriginal people, and it really did start the process of sort of the apology and the reconciliation that the government needs to do. 3.6 to 1.5, so that's a ratio. That is actually the body mass index of Aboriginals under the age of 25 and non-Aboriginals under the age of 25. So there's clearly a large difference, especially in the younger generation, and it's actually a really big gap. And then the 15.9, that is the percentage of Americans that are diagnosed with diabetes that are Aboriginal or Indigenous, or identify as Aboriginal or Indigenous. And that's actually the largest demographic group, like, that is diagnosed with diabetes. So here is just a visual representation of some of the things I just said. There you can see the ratio of the body mass index. And here you can see the largest group of people being diagnosed with diabetes, type 2 diabetes, is actually Aboriginals and Natives, which is an issue that hasn't really been brought to light. So just a little bit about type 2 diabetes. It's a form of diabetes that can be developed over time, and essentially it's just insulin resistance. So your body has, due to obesity, inheritance, or other factors, your body can no longer use the insulin that your pancreas produces to digest glucose. So basically glucose will just sit in your blood, so that you have like really high blood sugar, or you have blood sugar problems where there's massive influx just based on your lifestyle, which can be really dangerous to your body. At the top, there's a small quote, and it says that type 2 diabetes is a white man's disease. This is a quote from a novel written by an Aboriginal author. She's American, and she was talking about westernization and all of the detrimental effects that westernization has had on her community and on her cultural beliefs and on her, like, just her demographic group in general. And she related and she compared type 2 diabetes to smallpox. And personally, that really hit home for me. Not that I can really understand what she would feel at that time, but the fact that something as like emotionally and like historically important as the smallpox problem brought over by settlers was related to type 2 diabetes, it's mind-blowing. So there are some ways to combat type 2 diabetes, and some of them include just monitoring your blood pressure, monitoring your weight, eating healthy or healthier than you can, if it's possible, and then just sort of regular exercise. But that's also a lot to ask from people who might not have access to fresh fruits and vegetables all year round, or who may not be able to afford the fresh fruits and vegetables that are available to them. That's a lot to ask. So that sort of brings me to my global action plan. There are two components to the epidemic that's happening right now and the problem that's growing in Aboriginal communities. There's inactivity, and then there's just sort of unhealthy eating. My global action plan, as a single person, I can't combat both. As a single person, I can barely combat one because it's really something that's a generational, over time snowball effect. So what I want to do is I want to create a after-school program, like a children's after-school extracurricular program that basically just encourages healthy lifestyles, but also is like a physical activity program so they can have fun activities going on with minimal infrastructure and minimal materials. And I also want to create a workbook and a coloring book, and basically they would be mirroring like the same images, and they would be reflecting healthy lifestyle choices and healthy living, and they would also be culturally appropriate, so they would include like characters that the children who are reading these would actually relate to. To elaborate on that a little bit more, the main goals of my program, or the main goals of my GAP, are to develop a program, so an athletics program, and then to establish a relationship with a community and a community partner. That is, the second goal is actually probably the most important goal that goes over my entire global action plan, my entire, just more than just the 5 years, it goes over basically everything that I want to accomplish. The first thing I need to do is establish a relationship with a community partner. And I have actually found a community partner, which I will elaborate on the next slide, but it's the Aboriginal Sport and Wellness Council of Ontario. And one of my friends who's in the course, Nicole Miller, her mother gave me the contact of the director of, he's the director of sort of basically just anything to do with reaching out to communities, and she gave me his contact, and I've been in contact with him. But essentially what I want to do is I want to work with this council, and I want to work with a community that they already have an existing relationship with, And my goal is to basically create a program with the community and with the partner so that we can create it based on what they need, not just creating a program and coming in and just handing it to them and say, okay, use this. I want to create it with them. I want to build it with them. I want to see what needs to be done, what they have available to them, who they have available to them, and I want to work from that. I want to be able to have a strong enough relationship with my community that I can go visit and I can try out the program and I can see how it goes in person. But that also takes a lot of time, especially as an outsider, someone who doesn't have a pre-existing strong relationship with an Aboriginal community. That is a lot to ask, and it will take time. So I know that this fits into my 5-year plan far past the 5 years. Going back to my first goal is to develop a program. So essentially what I said is I want to develop an athletics program for kids, and that would also be paired with the book program. And it's supposed to be easy to follow, it's supposed to be fun and engaging, culturally appropriate, and the kids are essentially encouraged to live healthy lifestyles without telling them you need to eat vegetables that aren't available to you and you need to go for a run even though it's winter, because that's ridiculous. That's not fair. So essentially it's working with the community to develop a program that works for them. Okay, so this is the Aboriginal Sport and Wellness Council of Ontario. Their main goals are to promote healthy living, and they also run the North American Indigenous Games and the National Aboriginal Hockey Championships. So they actually do a lot of work all over Ontario, basically being like a sports league, and they also run a lot of programs for youth to like elders in their communities that they work with. And this is just their mission statement. So to enhance the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, cultural, and social well-being of Aboriginal peoples in Ontario through physical activity, recreation, and sports activities. As you can see, that clearly has very similar goals to what I want to do. So this is why I've decided to partner with them, and I have been in contact with their director as well. So my 5-year plan, like I said, it will take some time. So the first year is sort of this year and next year. It's more sort of starting as soon as the course ends, but I want to identify my target community, and that really involves talking to my community partner, seeing who they have pre-existing contacts with, seeing who they think needs this program or could use this program to really benefit their community, and it's working from that. I want to continue building my relationship with this community partner as well. And I'm going to be beginning my first year at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. So that actually brings me to my second year. And in my second year, I really want to get involved in a research project that is related to this issue. Ireland actually, by 2020, is projected to have the highest obesity rates in all of Europe. So going to Ireland, although I'm not working with Aboriginal communities in Ireland, I am working with the same issue that I'm trying to combat. There's a lot to learn from where I'm going, and they actually have a huge epidemiology and pathology research department at the school that I will be attending, which I really think can help my project. I also want to be able to visit the community, so when I come back for summer break and when I come back for any vacations, I want to be able to visit my community. I want the relationship that I have built with my community partner and then hopefully a target community, to be strong enough by year 2 that I can at least go visit and see, like with maybe someone from the organization, but go see what it is that we can do to help. I want to see it in person, and I think that that's a really big step in actually developing an effective program. I want to continue developing the program that year with my community partner, and I also want to have both of the books finished by then. They're not like novels, they're just sort of maybe 20 pages, and they're 20 pages each. But they have activities, and they have coloring, and they have fill in the blanks, and then there's also a storybook. So it will take some time, but it's not a novel, so it won't take the entire 5 years. By year 3, I want to be able to have the program fully developed with my community partner, and I want them to maybe run a trial of it. I think that would probably be a good step in before actually putting the program in place, is just to run a trial with it, to see how it goes over with the communities, to see how it goes over with the volunteers, and to see, whether it's actually going to work or not, whether it's actually a plausible plan or plausible program to put in place. I just want to be able to develop a strong program with the community partner, and I want to be able to have a strong relationship with the community partner. And at this point, if that's not done, then that's a problem, and I need to find a new partner or I need to find a new community. By year 4, I really hope that the program that I've developed with the community and with the community partner is implemented, because it's been altered enough that it actually fits their needs and it fits what they have available and it fits sort of what the program's goal is. It's really important that by the time this is implemented that there's sufficient funding, that it's a sustainable program, and that would be sort of working more with the organization, and that would be hopefully if they were partnering with me, they'd back me up on that and they'd say, yeah, we can fund this. We already work in this community. We have volunteers that are willing to do this for 5 years at least, you know. I want it to be a sustainable program. I want it to keep going, and that's a really year-by-year thing, but I want it to be able to be in place for a long amount of time. And then year 5, I want to, if I'm not involved in a research project at this point at my school, then I have a problem, because I need to be involved in a research project at this point. And if I'm not, then I will find one in Canada, even if it means that I have to work electronically in the middle of the night, because I really am passionate about this issue. I want to be able to visit the community that this program has been implemented in and actually see how it works and see how it works in person once it's in full swing. I think that that's really important in keeping it a sustainable program and also developing it further or potentially using it for other communities that are similar to them. I want to be able to fix all the hiccups and have the community really give me feedback about their program and what they think needs to be done, whether they think it's actually working. I want to make sure I have all the feedback available to me. And I just want to make sure that the program is sustainable. If by year 5 the program doesn't seem like it's going to last much longer, then we obviously need to change some things in order to make it a sustainable program and a long-lasting program. Because this issue is generational, and this issue is a snowball effect, and it will take time. It doesn't just take 5 years. It doesn't just take 10 years. It takes a lot more than that. So my progress thus far, I have actually talked to Clay, like I said, and they have been organizing the oh my gosh, what's it called? The Aboriginal Games, sort of, that's happening just now. They're recruiting volunteers, and they've been super, super, super busy. So he said, I'm so sorry. I will give you as much information as I can. He's actually been compiling it for me, but he said he would send it to me after. And mostly that revolves around sort of their mission and also how we can start taking the first steps in finding a community that they work with already, that they already have a relationship with, that I could work with as well. One thing that I have noticed throughout my research is that I actually haven't found any single organization that has the same goals as me. Nobody is out there right now trying to decrease diabetes. People are trying to increase activity, but nobody's trying to decrease diabetes. They are sort of reverse of each other, but at the same time, people are trying to increase activities mostly for social reasons, and mine isn't as much of a social problem as it is sort of an ethical problem almost. It's just not fair. And also, I have talked to Start to Finish. So Appleby does a lot of work with Start to Finish. Some of you guys might have participated. I don't know if the grade 11s participated in Spring Forward this year. But essentially, they have a running and reading program. And their running and reading program works a lot to increase literacy rates and also increase physical activity in kids who might not have that opportunity. So I have talked to their curriculum development. There's a woman who develops a lot of their programs for the schools. And I've talked to her mostly about the physical activity component, although their issue is physical activity and literacy. Mine's just mostly physical activity and decreasing obesity rates. So I've talked to her a bit about how she developed her curriculum, and I've actually taken some of that into consideration for when I do start developing my program. And also, this is an example of the workbook and coloring book sort of page. So I know this is small, but essentially it's like him and his dad going fishing, and then it would be fill in the blank. This is just an example of something that I might do. Again, I'm still trying to compile ideas, and I want to make sure that it's also culturally appropriate, which is also adding a bit more time onto the process of that. But yeah, that is my global action plan.
Thank you so much for an excellent presentation. And I'm so sorry I haven't given you time notes. I want to open things up for comments and questions. I had just a couple things to bear in mind. Actually, I had written down Indigenous games and Aboriginal games. Might be something for you to consider going and attending. Trying to meet some groups, because it's in Toronto this year. It's I think 75 different sports that folks are doing. So it's an excellent opportunity.
I was thinking about volunteering. I'm not sure if I'm in town.
Well, and one other thing that might be something to just bear in mind is when it comes to things with sports is the concept of a cultural appropriation within the community. And so kind of thinking in mind of, say, for example, how lacrosse has been taken and used. So bearing that in mind when you're trying to think about exercise. And then I'm asking this as a question, but perhaps I should let others do this too, because I did this for both Lauren and for Nikhil, all who were interested in working with Indigenous issues, is the how will you respond if you're considered to be a foreign actor coming in to a community who actually would rather self-advocate?
Yeah, so absolutely. So that's why I've decided to partner with the ASWCO, because they actually they work with communities all over Ontario to run after-school programs, to run programs for sort of elders in the community. They work with so many different communities, and they already have a lot of really strong, really positive relationships, because they're not actually governmental as much as they are sort of an NGO. So they don't have the same sort of stigma that goes along with them when they try and work with communities, which is why I've decided to partner with them, and I actually want to learn from them what to do before I go and make mistakes. I want to learn from them first. So that's why I've decided to partner with them, and I actually think that was a really big step in sort of preventing any problems from happening. Again, that's something that just could happen, and I will do everything in my power to avoid any problems from happening, but if I were to sort of run into that problem, I would definitely talk to my community partner, because they clearly would know a lot about that sort of issue and those sort of things that come into play.
Thank you. Excellent answer.
So Annika, I'm just really impressed with your presentation. Was amazing, and I really like all the elements that you highlighted, particularly about yourself and what your plans are next year. And also interesting the link that, or the emphasis that I guess Ireland's putting on diabetes, or they will be putting on diabetes, given that it's such a problem there. So that seems like really realistic that you'll be able to continue to work on this. You mentioned that you were able to visit some Aboriginal communities. So I was just wondering, what that was like, and how did that help you shape your gap? Yeah,
so I actually went to Moose Jaw, which is really cool. We didn't do too much sort of like site touring and stuff, but we were in the community center, and we were talking to a lot of the people that work in the community center, and so those are a lot of times volunteers, and they were talking about, I didn't really have this issue highlighted in my mind at the time when I had visited. It was sort of before my grade 12 year, but I just realized retrospectively, I realized they were local volunteers that wanted to make a difference, and there's clearly a lot of positive energy in trying to make a difference from the locals, and I think that that's something that really I learned a lot about. I didn't think that going into researching this, I was worried that maybe they won't be interested in volunteering, maybe they'll just completely reject the idea, but people are willing to try new things. People are sort of open to ideas as long as it's not invasive. So I did learn a lot about that.
Well, in that sort of time, I'll let.
So it's a brilliant plan, right? It's modest in scope, which means it's achievable. Are there? I see that, and I know the importance of partnering with the Aboriginal sports organization. Okay, because
they know what they're doing,
and they're going to help you to understand what this. Are there other organizations? I mean, I guess I'm wondering is on the diabetes side of it.
Yeah, so I actually did look into that, and the Canadian Diabetes Association does do work with sort of just big communities in general, but it's mostly in urban areas, and it's mostly sort of big workshops or just smaller, more personal things, but those tend to be costly and not as achievable in sort of rural areas or Aboriginal communities where they're out of the way and they're not in urban centers. And then there was also, I did actually see there is something in Manitoba that is sort of similar where they've been increasing activity programs, but it closed in 2011. So I did look at their website, but half of the links were dead.
Yeah.
So I did get some information from them, but not a lot. And I was trying to actually contact the person who used to be the head of it, just to see, you know, maybe why, if something went wrong, like if I could try and avoid that. All of the links were dead. So that's a little bit worrying, but that was also an independent organization, and right now I'm just a single person reaching out to an independent organization that's actually quite strong, and they have a really good foothold. So I have looked into other things. There are other people that are trying to sort of combat the same issue, but in terms of trying to combat it by decreasing diabetes rates, like specifically that.
I wonder too about, for example, territorial governments.
Yeah.
That where you know, working with Indigenous communities is a major, because certainly, you know, Ontario
Yeah.
does a lot, but the Indigenous population in
Majority,
Ontario
yeah.
is a small minority of,
Yeah.
of the population.
So I tried to look into territorial stuff. There isn't a lot of online resources. That's the only struggle.
You might have better luck. Actually,
Yeah,
like,
I think it would be.
contacting
Yeah, that's.
someone.
and that's what I was trying to do.
We have a brilliant student who was here a couple of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
who is in Ottawa and is now he's a policy intern at Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada. He would be a great person.
That
to
would be a
to
great
be in
contact.
touch with. The odds are he's not working on this particular
Yeah.
area, but I'd be pretty sure he would.
Especially when it comes to like
I would pass his name
being
along.
culturally appropriate as well. That would be really important. Yeah.
One final question, because I know we're pressed for time. Congratulations on your acceptance to university. You're going to be in Ireland, which
Yeah.
you've acknowledged. Your plan is here in Ontario. I've heard that medical school is pretty busy. How do you see that allowing you to stay focused and committed to this global action plan? What do you think will keep you rooted there?
Well, I really do feel passionate about this issue, and I really want to get involved in a research project that's relevant. So I kind of want to flip-flop basically the year. When I'm home, I want to be working on this, and I want to be focused on this, and I want to be developing the program. And because I'm working with a community partner, I can do that sort of online or via email. We can work because we're working together, but we're not going to be in the community that we're working in every time we're working on it. So it's a lot of online stuff and emails and back and forth sort of thing. But when I'm in Ireland, I actually plan to learn more about the issue and want to learn more about type 2 diabetes, more about the epidemic that's really growing in the world. So it is hard to balance. At the same time, I also want to be able to learn more. And I think learning more about the issue will also help me develop a program that's better suited to combat the issue. So I think sort of it's splitting the year in half and then spending my time sort of proportionally.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
We know that we're at the end of this time, and we thank you so much for an excellent presentation. So first off, maybe we can give her.